Breaking news from around your world on this Thursday, January 24th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Venezuela's opposition on Thursday will seek to maintain pressure on isolated President Nicolas Maduro after Congress Chief Juan Guaido swore himself in as interim head of state with the support of nations around the region. Before a mass of demonstrators in Caracas, Guaido said it's the only way to end the Maduro dictatorship in Venezuela, which has seen millions flee in recent years to escape sky-high inflation and food shortages. Violence that flared during big anti-government demonstrations across Venezuela on Wednesday left at least 7 protesters dead. Maduro has been increasingly accused of undemocratic behavior by the United States and many other nations in the region. Guaido won diplomatic backing from the U.S., Canada, and right-leaning Latin American governments. The European Union stopped short of recognizing Guaido as leader, but said the democratic will of Venezuelans cannot be ignored and called for his civil rights, freedom, and safety to be respected. But Russia, China, Iran, Syria, Cuba, and Turkey have voiced their backing for Maduro's government. Maduro fired back by breaking diplomatic relations with the U.S., the biggest trading partner for the oil-exporting country, and ordering American diplomats to get out of the country within 72 hours. Washington said it would ignore the order. The chief of Airbus warned Thursday that the aviation giant could move its UK operations out of Britain if the country leaves the European Union without a deal on trade relations, in one of the starkest assessments yet of the economic impact of a no-deal Brexit. CEO Tom Enders said Brexit threatened to destroy a century of development in Britain's world-leading aviation industry. Airbus has more than 14,000 employees in Britain, with 110,000 more working in jobs supported by Airbus programs, as well as nearly $8 billion in annual turnover. Enders said, "Make no mistake, there are plenty of countries out there who would love to build the wings for Airbus aircraft." Business leaders have expressed growing frustration at the lack of progress in securing a Brexit deal before Britain's scheduled March 29th exit from the bloc. UK firms are bracing for disruption amid fears that a no-deal Brexit will cause economic chaos by eliminating trade agreements and imposing tariffs, customs checks, and other barriers between the UK and the EU, its biggest trading partner. The Bank of England has said that in a worst-case scenario, a sudden Brexit with no deal on future relations could trigger a recession, with Britain's economy shrinking 8% within months as unemployment and inflation soar. Rescuers ended their search on Thursday for the plane carrying Premier League soccer player Emiliano Sala, which disappeared over the English Channel 3 days ago after saying there was little chance anyone aboard had survived. Sala, Cardiff City's new signing, along with the plane's pilot, David Ibbotson, have been missing since Monday night. Rescuers have scoured about 1,700 square miles but have found no trace of the aircraft or those on board. After the plane disappeared, a recording emerged of a fearful voice message Sala apparently sent, in which he expressed concern about the single-engine Piper Malibu aircraft he was flying in. Officials said the search had involved 80 hours combined flying time by 3 planes and 5 helicopters, with 2 lifeboats and other ships in the area also helping. The 28-year-old Argentina-born forward was en route from Nantes in western France to make his debut for the Welsh soccer team Cardiff City. Police said a gunman who took over a SunTrust bank branch in Florida apparently made 5 women inside lie down on the lobby floor before shooting them execution style in the back of their heads. Sebring police said after shooting them, 21-year-old Zephan Zaver called 911 and told dispatchers that he'd killed everyone in the bank. Police said Zaver refused to surrender and would not allow officers to reach the victims. After more than an hour of negotiations, the chief ordered a SWAT team in. They used an armored vehicle to break through the front doors. Zaver was found in an office in the rear. According to an affidavit, all the victims were found in the bank's lobby, lying face down with gunshots to the backs of their heads. Shell casings from Zaber's 9mm handgun were scattered on the floor. Investigators said there's no indication that Zaber intended to rob the bank and no apparent connection among him or the bank or the victims. He's been charged with 5 counts of premeditated murder. A Ukrainian court on Thursday sentenced former President Viktor Yanukovych in absentia to 13 years in jail on treason charges. A judge said his conduct in office had opened the door to Russia's annexation of Crimea and conflict in eastern Ukraine. Yanukovych fled to Russia in 2014 following street protests against his rule. His successor, Petro Poroshenko, has adopted a pro-Western foreign policy, reversing Yanukovych's tilt toward Moscow. The judge said Yanukovych sent a letter to Russian President Vladimir Putin on March 1, 2014, asking him to use Russian army and police forces to restore order in Ukraine. Yanukovych left Ukraine after 3 months of protests, during which more than 100 demonstrators were killed in clashes in the Ukrainian capital. Yanukovych has previously denied the allegations made by prosecutors and blamed armed nationalist radicals for fomenting violence in the 2014 Maidan protests that prompted him to flee. Yanukovych's lawyers said they would appeal the judgment. The issue of preserving the pro-European vector of development will be one of the key debates in the upcoming presidential election, in which the current president, Poroshenko, and former associates of Yanukovych will most likely take part. Italy has been ordered by the European Court of Human Rights to pay almost $20,000 to Amanda Knox, the American exchange student who spent years in prison for a murder of which she was later acquitted. Knox's long-running legal battle was closely followed by global media during years of retrials and appeals. She took Italy to court over her initial treatment by Italian police, alleging her rights had been violated. In a statement, the ECHR said she was interviewed without legal assistance at a time when there was a criminal charge against her without any exceptional circumstances to justify it. The ECHR said Knox did not have proper access to a lawyer and interpreter. Knox's British roommate, 21-year-old Meredith Kircher, was murdered in Perugia in 2007. Her body was discovered by police in November that year. Her throat had been cut, and there were signs of sexual violence. Police arrested Knox and Knox's Italian boyfriend, Raffaele Sollecito, 5 days after Kircher's death. They were both also found guilty of murder in 2009 and sentenced to 26 and 25 years in prison. After more than 3 years behind bars, both were acquitted of murder. But in 2014, the convictions were reinstated, though Knox was back in the United States and refused to travel to Italy. In 2015, Italian courts acquitted both Knox and Sollecito in the final verdict of the case. President Donald Trump says he is postponing his State of the Union address until the partial government shutdown ends, yielding after a week-long showdown with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Trump conceded Wednesday night that no venue can compete with the history, tradition, and importance of the House chamber. He said he was not looking for an alternate option after Pelosi served notice earlier in the day that he wouldn't be allowed to deliver the address to a joint session of Congress next week. Pelosi had taken the step after Trump said he planned to show up in spite of Democratic objections to the speech taking place, with large swaths of the government shut down. Pelosi told Trump the House wouldn't approve a resolution allowing him to address Congress until the shutdown ended. The Constitution states only that the president shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the State of the Union, meaning the president can speak anywhere he chooses or give his update in writing. The address had been delayed before. President Ronald Reagan's 1986 State of the Union address was postponed after the Challenger space shuttle exploded in flight on January 28th of that year. But there is no precedent for a State of the Union invitation being rescinded. Digital media company BuzzFeed is cutting 15% of its job force, or about 200 people, to trim costs and become profitable. BuzzFeed CEO Jonah Peretti wrote employees Wednesday that the layoffs will help BuzzFeed avoid having to raise money from investors again. The privately held company has not been profitable for several years. It's raised hundreds of millions of dollars from such investors as Comcast's NBC Universal. The New York company is best known for its viral posts and quizzes and has its own news division. Many digital media companies have cut jobs or sold off in recent years as Facebook and Google gobble up the bulk of digital advertising dollars. Verizon also said Wednesday that it is cutting about 800 jobs in its media division, which includes Yahoo and HuffPost. A Manhattan apartment has just been sold for $238 million, the most expensive home ever sold in the U.S. The property in the luxury 220 Central Park South building has 4 floors and naturally overlooks the famous New York City park. The buyer is billionaire Ken Griffin, the 50-year-old founder of the hedge fund Citadel. The 66-story skyscraper is located on a street appropriately named Billionaires Row. Before Griffin bought the Central Park apartment, the most expensive abode in the U.S. was a house in East Hampton that sold for $137 million in 2014. Griffin also made headlines Monday for buying another high-priced property, a $124 million home near Buckingham Palace in London. He already holds records for buying the most expensive apartments in Miami, which he bought for $60 million in 2015, and in Chicago, which he spent almost $59 million on last year. The billionaire also owns 3 other luxury homes in Chicago, 6 in the Palm Beach area of Florida, and 2 homes in Hawaii. And that's your update for this Thursday, January 24th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.